Hi, I'm Catherine Llewellyn, the host of the podcast. You can find out all about Truth and Transcendence on truthandtranscendence.com. And you can find out all about me on beingspace.world, where you will find my online coaching offering as well as my UK-based workshops. The Freedom of Spirit workshop for liberation and empowerment, the Pellowah Radical Shift in Consciousness workshop for spiritual expansion, and transformational coaching for exploring the mind-body-spirit connection on the expansive path. You can also support the podcast by actually making a donation. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. Today's special guest is Hope Fitzgerald, who's here today to talk about Polish That Soul. Hope is a spiritual teacher, an intuitive dowser, a visionary speaker, and author of The Infinity Wave, Mastering the Art of Love, Compassion, and Flow. Hope actually downloaded and channeled her unique modality, Infinity Wave, in 2010, and now runs international group retreats, often featuring trips to potent sites around the globe, which sounds really fun and delightful. So, Hope, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm really happy to be with you today and your audience.
Fantastic, yes. And before I start asking questions, just to let everyone know, you can find Hope at spreadinfinitehope.com, which I think is a really intriguing URL, spreadinfinitehope.com. So, Hope, when we spoke before, and we came up with this theme called Polish That Soul, which I thought was just so lovely. This is obviously something really close to your heart. When you think about it, if you think back in your life, can you actually remember the first time that you really clocked on to this idea of polish that soul?
That's a very good question. When would that have started? Well, I don't know that I would have been conscious of it at the time, but certainly looking back, I had many opportunities, as we all do, to well, what I call ring the high bell. And that is that when we have a choice of responding to a given situation, we have a wide variety of choices, right? And we can play a low note, medium note, or the high note. And so there have been multiple opportunities to choose. And I would say, gosh, so many. When my parents separated and I was a teenager, and I, as the eldest child, sort of took the role of leadership in the family for my younger siblings, and also caring for my mother. And I think that responsibility that I took on, it felt very natural at the time, but in retrospect, it was something that I said yes to. And then I performed that role for many, many years, probably past its due date. But as a teenager, to take on that kind of position was definitely not something that everybody had to do. So it grew me up very quickly. And looking back, it was the first opportunity to do some real scrubbing of my being. Putting my needs sometimes to the back of the bus in order to serve the family. I can't say I did it perfectly, but it was an unusual role that I took on.
Yeah. Of course, serving in relationship to a family, I always think the minute we think we're doing it perfectly, we're not. All the best parents, or shall we say stand-in parents, as you were being, often think they're not doing it perfectly because they realize they're constantly learning, don't they? So my mother died when I was 10, and I kind of stepped up, with pros and cons in my development. And so I recognize that thing of, stepping up in that moment and sort of taking something on beyond your years. So it's a very, very powerful thing. I love how you connect that with Polish That Soul. So for you, and you also said in hindsight, you didn't necessarily consciously think of it that way, but in hindsight, you can see that now.
Yeah.
So that was like a developmental thing for you, not just a piece of service.
Very much so, yeah. And, just taking on the purview of the health of the family unit and in its restructuring and the ups and downs that every member of the family had, I sort of became the stabilizer in a way. And that stayed with me for my whole life.
Right. So you still do that now in that kind of stabilizing energy. You bring that.
Yeah.
Wow. And do you see a connection between that and your work with the infinity wave?
Well, now that I'm talking about it this way, I would say yes. Although, I mean, there were certainly many ups and downs throughout my life. And, repercussions from carrying the weight of that family that in my 20s, I kind of crashed, eventually. And climbing back out of that was another opportunity to polish my soul, for sure. And so now, well, when the infinity wave came in, it just so happens that it was at the tail end of a very difficult family situation that had been going on for about 9 months. And so the opportunity I had was because I was on, as a result of this very challenging family situation, I was on absolutely bottom, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. I had nothing in any tank. And, when that happens, it tends to make people sick. And I didn't want that to happen. So that's when I went away to these sound healing workshops to kind of empty myself of the trauma of that year and my whole life, and sort of renew and refill my coffers. And it was 3 days after that that the infinity wave came in. The learning that took place for the next couple of years as I was tutored really by the infinity wave, by doing it, by being led into what it was and how it works, was a huge polishing of my soul, because I did not desire to be teaching anything spiritually. I was very happy to be in my own little silo. I had community and all of that, but it was private. It was, I had learned, because I had been to Findhorn at a very young age, and, I came back, I was bubbling over with all the manifestation and this and that, and, all the ways of thinking that are outside of the box. And this was in the mid 70s, and people weren't exactly talking that way at that time. So I learned to be very, very quiet and shut it away. So then when years and years and years later, I had kept studying this and that and trying healing and just learning different philosophies and different modalities, but all very privately. So when the infinity wave dropped in there in my living room one day after this workshop, I discovered that I was supposed to be teaching it. That was about the last thing in the world I wanted to do. But I did, because you don't say no when spirit taps you on the shoulder and says, this is your next phase of life. So I think that I think that idea of equilibrium, of a stabilization, was already something, as I said, that was in my field. But the infinity wave gave me and gave others a tool to accomplish that very quickly.
Yeah. How fascinating. So you almost had like a secret path of soul polishing. And I was fascinated about the Findhorn thing. I think, wasn't it, did you say it was the early 70s or mid 70s that you went there?
1976.
1976. Okay. Well, I've been to Findhorn as well, but much more recently than that. And I know it's been through many different incarnations, hasn't it? What was it in particular that was so struck you about Findhorn at that time? What were the key sort of messages they were talking about? Other people weren't. I'll just ask you to summarize something completely unsummarizable.
Really, exactly. Uh, well, it was still being run by Peter and Eileen Caddy, the original people. It was humming along. It was very large. They had 2 campuses. People were there from all over the world. They had 200 people at least in residence, and then many, many visitors during the summer months, especially. Um, what struck me first was the I had a Dorothy in the Wizard of Oz moment when I got off the little bus that dropped me at the main campus. And I got off the bus and I looked to my right, and all I saw was sand dunes and a little bit of seagrass and these trailers, these trailer park kind of thing. And then I looked to my left, and it was lush green bushes, trees, hummingbirds, bees. And I looked over here and I looked over here, and it's like, how is this even possible? It was a clear demarcation. And I walked into the green, Findhorn area, and I just felt like I was moving into another world. The energy of the place, and I don't look, when we talk about energy, it's such a big word and it means so many things. I will just summarize and say a sense of well-being, a sense of interconnectedness, a sense of interconnectedness. And when you emerge into a sense of interconnectedness of all things, you can't really put your words on it. It's this feeling. And the other, aside from, so that was one thing. They taught classes there. And so I took a course for a couple of weeks. And one of the things they taught there was a theory of evolution as they understood it from Teilhard de Chardin, the 18th century, 19th century Renaissance man, philosopher, anthropologist, et cetera, and priest. And his theory of evolution is something that came forward that I used to teach the infinity wave. It was so interesting. But just to go back and finish up about Findhorn, the way people interacted with one another, the love was so palpable. The joy in everything was so palpable that that I had at my young age of 21, cynicism, anything like that, completely on the third day blew out. And then I too entered the stream of interconnectedness and love. And when you're in that stream, all things are possible. All things are happening. The law of manifestation, as they taught it then, seemed totally natural. Totally, yeah. I've used it my whole life. And yeah, so those are some of the ways that Findhorn affected me.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so wonderful that there are these places we can go to that just meet us where we are and where we, and it's so interesting, that thing about, because we look at a modality someone's developed And we try to understand what the modality is and how it works. We don't very often look behind it at what has unfolded for that person in order for that to happen. And I love your thing of it actually started right back when you stepped up to support your family, because you were then, as you beautifully say, polishing that soul. And you kept following until one day the infinity wave was presumably like, guys, I think she's ready now.
Yes, exactly. And I said, folks, you're a little late. I mean, I'm not 35 anymore. Like, you're really giving me this task at this age. You're like, yeah, you're ready. It's time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you better keep me on, because this is not to introduce a modality to, and they said it's for the wide world. And I'm like, I live next door to a sheep farm in rural Massachusetts. How am I going to do that? Step by step. But they opened the gates for me. I said, you're going to have to do that because I have no idea. And they did. And so I think, let me show the book cover just so we know what we're talking about. So this figure, I don't know if it's backwards for you, but this figure 8 of flowing water is the best representation of the infinity wave that I could muster.
Yeah.
And so this is what was the third vision that I received in my living room, walking across the living room on my third day back from the sound healing workshops. And so the first one was a giant wave, many, many, many stories high, beautiful turquoise wave. And it didn't feel intimidating. It was slowly moving towards me. And there was this byline, this kind of ticker tape almost, that said I'll paraphrase, this wave represents a push of evolution that is coming to the planet. And it is going to be circling around and anchoring in at the end of 2011. This was November 2010. And if you choose to resist this push, things will go worse for you than if you learn to swim with it or surf it. And then the wave turned on its side and became that beautiful curling, cresting wave like a letter C. And it said, as the water pulls away from the shore and anchors into the seabed to get its energy, which is to make the crest, that's the physics of a wave, so should you, meaning me, but meaning all of us, leave your book learning on the shore, go to the earth and the wisdom keepers of the earth for your knowledge, and then mix that with this incoming push. And then instead of the curling water just falling straight down into the sea as it normally would, that's when it turned into this figure 8 of standing water. And it hung out in front of my forehead for a couple of days, and there was no byline, no explanation. So by that point, I had been a dowser for, 15, 18 years, something like that. And I developed a way of inquiry that didn't quite always have to be yes and no. I just kind of worked it in a certain way. So after a series of sitting down with my dowsing rods, I received the information that we could call this the infinity wave, that it represents a force, a powerful force. So this is a way for our minds to hang on to something. We can't hang on to a force. I mean, it's too amorphous, right? That this inherent in that watery flow, and also the force, inherent in that watery flow is a very highly refined love and compassion. So this is, I think, 10th dimensional. It doesn't really matter what dimension it is, but it's very pristine, really without emotion. And when we imagine this figure 8 of flowing water in our bodies, in our hearts, from heart to heart, from people to trees, to plants, to stars, to Middle Earth, whatever, it can stretch any way. we are automatically communicating in this love and compassion. And it creates a field. And it's so interesting because, well, then they told me, oh, I'll wait for that. Then they told me that I was supposed to start teaching about this. And this is when I said, no, thank you very much. And they said, yes, you need to. So I said yes, but I was terrified. And really terrified beyond what was necessary, I guess, when I look back on it. But we have these old triggers, and I do believe in past lives. And I think there were very old triggers from past horrible things that would happen if you went and stood up like this. But the more, as I've gone along this trail now for 15 years, I realized that I did build this into my plan, that it was a part of polishing my soul, because there were specific reasons why I had built it in to receive this and to then teach it. And part of it, I always had a problem with being insecure. And it's funny that I became a performer. Because I was always pushing myself to try to not be insecure. And I think in a way, my last insecurity, my last frontier in a way, was teaching about the thing most dear to me, which was spirituality. And so it was my last, not my last, I have many more things to be polishing, believe me, but it was a big one, big one to try to overcome.
Amazing. It's so wonderful. I just, one of the modalities I work with talks about having our unique mission in life. And then that mission has to include our own expansion and evolving and our contribution. And your story and your life and what you're doing really expresses that so beautifully. Because I think often people are thinking, how do I contribute? How do I evolve? Which one should I be focusing on? Whereas actually, obviously, it's both. And if I can share with you something that happened for me that what you were talking about with those visions just reminded me of. A few months back, I had this dream, and in the dream, I'm walking along beautiful grass next to the sea, and also there's a lake. And for some reason, it's really important. There's a lake and the sea, and there's this wave in the sea, which is very, very, very high. And it's absolutely still. And it looks solid. And it's shining kind of silver and blue. And I'm just walking along and I don't feel at all threatened. And I think you said the same. You didn't feel threatened. I didn't feel at all threatened. It felt like this was just an important thing for me to experience, but no one was going to tell me why. And for some reason, one of my cats was walking along beside me. And we were just walking along together. And then the dream came to an end and I came out and it just felt like a gift. So how interesting is that? Maybe that was that, you said that powerful wave coming in, bringing, change and transformation. Maybe I was getting just a little bit of a reflection of part of what you're doing.
Yes. And I'll tell you, I have received so many emails about people either being 8 people, they always Google 8, or it's in their logos, or it's in there. And so many water people, who just have wave thing, like the one, not exactly like that beautiful dream that you had. And I'll say, as soon as I got up to speed minimally, with what this thing was, I went straight to the internet, because I know first of all, was I going crazy? I don't know. But let me look on the internet, because maybe other people are receiving the infinity sign, and they talked about conscious evolution. Well, they talked about evolution. And then I kept thinking, well, if this is a push of evolution and we're supposed to be using this as a tool to get there, well, this is kind of, I would call this conscious evolution. So I look up conscious evolution. Well, there's no infinities being used anywhere. Nobody has it in their logos. It's nowhere. It's not in jewelry. It's not anywhere. Then I look up conscious evolution. I see one thing, and that's Barbara Marx Hubbard taught a class that had conscious evolution in it. And I read about it, but it wasn't like this. So I thought, well, because it doesn't make sense to me that I would be the only one receiving this. It's a collective, consciousness that's coming. It's just that I got it a little early. And so when I started teaching about it in January 2011, as they told me to, I received, and I still didn't know what the heck I was teaching. I started receiving every week. Wasn't a channeler until that time, but all of a sudden my voice would get very low when I started dowsing, and these whole practices would kind of blur out. And I played sound bowls at the time. And so I would receive 3 of these practices for each weekend. A workshop was 3 weekends, 1 per month. So it was a long time. It took time to integrate this infinity wave. And as I went through the whole thing, I never knew what I was doing, except I just really had to walk in faith and trust that I would be guided in some way, and I was. But it was terrifying because I'm a fairly buttoned up person as a teacher. I know what my lesson plan is. I know what I want the result to be. I'm pretty good about that. I was being asked to go flying blind, just okay. So but when we got to the end of the 9 practices on the very end of the 3rd weekend, and I looked back over the practices, I realized they were a step by step, like stones across the river to an evolutionary leap. So we would start from one place, and the whole series of the workshop would take us to another place. Part of the thing was becoming disconnected from time, being disconnected from gravity, learning how to, experience ourselves in a flow state all the time. It was remarkable because I couldn't see around the corner. Thank goodness, because where's the fun in that? But now I can see around corners better. But at that time I couldn't. And it was only in looking back. And then I realized this really was a plan. This is a pathway to taking a leap up in your evolutionary journey. So, but what was interesting was we went the whole year. I repeated that process 2 more times, received a few more practices. And January 2012, all of a sudden, in comes the infinity sign in everything. It starts in the logos. It starts in the jewelry. It becomes the #1 tattoo for women. It's everywhere. It's on packages. It's everywhere. And now, of course, we know it's everywhere. People don't know why. This is leading back to your dream because it's here, this push of evolution, this beautiful force of love and compassion is available. It's here for those of us who are ready to receive it.
Yeah.
So I think it's meant for everyone. And it's so beneficial. It's a loving gift from the universe to help us through these times. Because if we're love and compassion, we're in a state of flow. If we're in a state of flow, we're in a state of love and compassion. It's represented with that geometry. I mean, there's a lot of other things that the geometry represents, but
how beautiful. I mean, your workshops, retreats, whatever you want to call them, they sound more like, I don't know, plunges into
yeah, I call them deep dives. Exactly.
dives. Okay, plunges. It's slightly less slightly less elegant way of describing it. I guess in my particular circle, I sometimes have people saying to me that they're having experiences or they're finding themselves, maybe something's trying to come through. Maybe they're trying to, maybe, does it mean anything? How do they respond to it? Are they actually downloading something? Are they just mad? Are they just that? Are they just trying to, is their ego just trying to make them feel special? You know, going through these, going through these difficult experiences.
Yeah.
Now, you're somebody,
So relate.
yeah, I just wondered if you have any tips for those people just to help them kind of navigate, experience, work with that type of experience as it's coming through for them.
Yeah. I so relate because I asked all those same questions multiple times when this was happening in the beginning and for a long time after, really, just to keep double checking. Was my ego getting involved? Is this some kind of aggrandizement? Like, let me say, doing this kind of thing is very challenging. The world of spirituality is fairly well set. It's ancient practices. It's, it bringing something so-called new into a set world is really not that accepted. And so anyone who is forging a new path, it requires a great deal of trust. So I would say, if you don't already have some kind of tool, like, I have these little dowsing rods, and these guys, are my best friends. So, these are my travel rods because they're so tiny. But if I say, please show me a yes, that's a yes. Please show me a no, that's a no. But with dowsing rods, and it's not the same as a pendulum, which is also dowsing, but with dowsing rods, I'm going to just, I wasn't holding them then, there's a sleeve. But if now I'm holding them to show you, if they only go in 25%, that means something. You ask if something is in your highest physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual good. If it only comes in 25%, you go back and you say, is it in my highest physical good? No. My highest mental good? No. My highest emotional good? Yeah. My highest spiritual good? No. So then okay, what's happening here is happening on an emotional level. Now you get to travel down that rabbit hole and try to parse it out. But if you don't already have a tool like this that you have created a trust level with, go to someone who does. Go to someone. It could be tarot. It could be I Ching. It could be astrology. It could be all of the above. That's what I did. I wanted as many windows and mirrors on this to be super, super sure that I was following my life's path and not somehow getting involved.
Incredible
It
advice.
turns out, yeah. It turns out, I was, and now I understand that. But at the time, and the other thing is, I like to say, the universe can't catch you if you're not gonna fall. If you don't take the leap of faith, you can't be caught. And all the benefits are in that leap. Because when you get caught, when you get held, when you get led blindly, it's like the greatest gift of all. Because then I had always, until this time, I had always wanted to do what Buddha said, moving the heart, longest journey is from the head to the heart. What I think another way of saying that is to go from believing to knowing. And there's nothing wrong with believing, but when you move into knowing, it's the biggest gift.
Not the same at all.
It's not. Believing's pretty good. It takes you a long way. but it's that final leap that is required to get to the knowing. You can't get to it while you're still hanging onto the cliff. You have to.
But nevertheless, that's a fantastic piece of advice. The thing of go back to the thing that you already know and trust. And I think a lot of us have that, whether it's meditation, yoga, time in nature, a particular relationship. Maybe someone has a coach. Maybe someone has a piece of philosophical wisdom they read, like you were mentioning with Teilhard de Chardin. You know, most of us have something. And if we don't, actually, it's a very good idea to get something in place like that, just to help anchor us and ground us and support us. And as you say that, I kind of recognize in my life, I've always had something like that, where if I haven't had it, I've somehow known I need to find it. And that helps create the platform for me to be able to receive, work with whatever the thing is. So I suppose it's like our feet are on the earth as we are receiving what's coming in.
Yes. Yes. And so I don't want to leave out the shamanic, natural world, because it can send messages that are as strong as anything. And if we start to be aware and observe carefully the world around us and ask for what we need, ask for a sign, ask for it, and remember that we all have guide teams. Some of them are very big and some of them are just a handful. Doesn't matter the size. It's just we have teams and they want to work for us. So if we really start to have a discourse with them and believe in them, and they become a part of our family in a way, even better than family, because they never go away. They don't judge, they're just always there loving us. And so, when I go back to polishing the soul, I'll often, through dowsing or meditation or whatever, I will be reaching for that way to respond that is ringing the highest bell, because that might take some rearrangement of my ego. That might take some detaching from outcome. That might take a bunch of things. And my rods and my guide team, will inform me and help me, because every time we ring the high bell, we've done the most polishing.
Wow, how amazing. I'm going to switch slightly and ask a slightly different question now, which is, there's a lot going on in the world at the moment. I think we can all agree, and everyone's got different opinions and ideas about what should happen, etc. There's a lot of people out there in leadership roles of one sort or another, and I'm including in that people who are literally just trying to stand in their own leadership in their own lives. And I like to think most of those people are trying to be part of the solution. Is there something you'd like to say to those people, some of whom may be listening to this conversation right now, in relation to some of what we've been talking about?
Well, I think the ultimate goal of the infinity wave is to grant us freedom. Freedom from becoming sovereign. That's what I mean by freedom, to be sovereign in oneself, to have the flexibility to move here, there, or everywhere. Inherent in that is not attaching too much to the material world and even to world events. It doesn't mean don't care. It means watch for where you get hooked. Okay. And because sometimes what that does is it takes us from a position of sovereign, almost being a lighthouse, right? A beacon for others, which is really what the goal is here, to be that beautiful standing beam of light, a beacon. So when we get attached to something that's happening in the real world and we start to get upset by it and we start to what happens to our lighthouse? It starts to dim. Now, if we're standing for ourselves and for a cause, for instance, I am involved with, excuse me, sorry, orphan homes in Nepal, and I have my, a way that I think can help and been doing that. But if I get too attached to my ideas about how to help, I've noticed things start to go south and I start to dim. So it's a setup and it's a delicate balance to remain first and foremost as the light beacon that I want to be, and still be able to help or become the beacon for others, but without being hooked. So let's just remember that the 3D world is set up in a dualistic framework. It's yes or no, black or white, et cetera, et cetera. And in that dualism, there's usually a struggle. Who's right? Who's in? Is there a compromise? I don't know. Oh. And that's happening all the time in the material world. And that's how we grow. We choose how we're going to deal with these decisions. What are we going to do? We're going to ring the high bell. We're going to ring the low bell. We're going to play something in the middle. What are we going to do? Sorry. But when we use a technique such as the infinity wave or another technique, meditation, whatever it is, what we do is we open up the ceiling. So now we don't have to be in duality. We can be in the world of yes and, which is more fifth dimensional. It's more, I can hold multiple realities at the same time, not just two, maybe three, maybe four, maybe how many realities can I hold? Because I'm not attaching and hooking into them, I'm going to hold them all and go, oh, that's very interesting. And I have a more objective view. And when we are opened up like that, we get more information about ways to maybe handle these situations. Down here in 3D, there are only so many. But once we pop out, wow. And now we receive our guidance more clearly. And we can operate from a higher vibration, if you will. So, so sorry.
We've both been talking a lot, so it's not. I also think, actually, Hope, I noticed something, which is sometimes when there's a conversation which is very potent, quite often people find themselves having to clear their throat. Myself, that happens as well. So I think it's not necessarily a bad sign.
Okay. Well, I know it doesn't sound very good, so I apologize for that. But that's sort of, if everyone could stand in there, not just leaders, could stand in that sovereignty of that and be the light beacon, we actually serve the best from that standpoint, in my opinion.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That's wonderful. So let's just remind everybody where they can find you. Spreadinfinitehope.com. And your beautiful book. Would you mind holding up the book one more time? Where can people get that?
Anywhere online.
Anywhere. The Infinity.
Amazon, all the bookstores, you can get it.
Fantastic. Wonderful.
Or you can order it from your local bookstore.
Yeah. Excellent. So,
and I just finished the audiobook, so that's available too.
Oh, fantastic. And is that you speaking in the audiobook?
Yes. Yes.
Great. I dare say you went through a few glasses of water while you were doing that.
Actually, not too many. I used to be a voiceover artist years ago, and so I kind of just went pretty quickly. It was good.
Wow. Well, other people I know who've done audiobooks have told me that, it was hard work. But of course, if you actually worked with the voice professionally, that's completely different, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Hope, we've talked about
Yeah.
quite a lot today, and honestly, it's been fascinating for me. Has there been a favourite part of our conversation today for you?
Well, I'll say this, all of it's been wonderful. You're just perceptive and curious in a beautiful way. Um, I very much enjoyed your dream, and I think how you started things off was fascinating. I No one has asked that question, and to make me work to figure out when did I start polishing my soul. That was very good. Yeah, I appreciated that.
Fantastic. We don't often look back and validate our origins in that way. And
Mm,
I think it's a really valuable thing to do. I think we
yeah.
could validate ourselves a bit more than perhaps we tend to. So thank you so much for that. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's been absolutely beautiful. And one final thing I'm going to ask you for, if you'd like to, is to offer the listeners a reflection question of some kind that they can take into their week and contemplate as a way of helping them engage more deeply with part of what we've been talking about today.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, this might seem a bit extreme, but it is a part of the work I do that's um trying to find the best words for this. I work with death and dying as well. And for me, the ultimate question is, if I only had a week to live, what would I want to say? What would I want to do? How would I want to reflect my life as I was departing? And you can substitute a year. In fact, there's a wonderful book by Stephen Levine called A Year to Live. I like to live with the end in mind. So my question would be, how are you living with the end in mind?
Wow. Thank you. Beautiful. Well, I can confirm no one else has given that reflection question to the listeners so far. Maybe now that's what everyone's going to say. So thank you. That's so, so beautiful. Hope Fitzgerald, it's been an absolute delight having you on the show. Stick around. So, everybody, that's all for Truth and Transcendence for today. You can find our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, a 5-star rating. It makes such a difference. And share with your friends and comment on what we were discussing today. Until next time, have a great week. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. It really helps if you give a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, a review, and share with your friends. If you're looking for transformational coaching or an intensive transformational weekend workshop experience, I can help with that. You can actually help the show by making a donation. Until next time, take care.